I'm Travis Bader, and this is the Silvercore Podcast. Join me as I discuss matters related to hunting, fishing, and outdoor pursuits with the people and businesses that comprise the community. If you're new to Silvercore, be sure to check out our website, www.silvercore.ca, where you can learn more about courses, services, and products that we offer, as well as how you can join the Silvercore Club, which includes $10 million in North America-wide liability insurance to ensure you are properly covered during your outdoor adventures. This is the last week to get your name in to win the firefighter training package with the training division in Texas. If you want to be a firefighter, or if you know someone who does, this package is worth over $6,000 and it is absolutely free to enter. Check out silvercore.ca for full details. All right, I'm sitting down with Jason Budd, who is back by popular demand from the Silvercore Podcast listeners. Jason, you know this. Some of our listeners might not, but, we put the podcast in the audio format for people to listen to while they're driving or doing whatever. They can play it in the background, but I also put a version on YouTube. And you have the distinction of having our most viewed Silvercore podcast with a current count. I think we're about 23,000 views on the last episode we did. So congratulations, Jason.
Well, Trav, I was getting constant text messages every time we moved up a few thousand from you. So I think you're more excited than I was.
Yeah, I was pretty excited.
Yeah.
I don't know. The feedback we're getting on it was fantastic too. I mean, people were listening through with a critical ear, and I'm sure the subject matter probably somehow hit in YouTube a little bit because we were talking about SAS selection and the time in the British Army. And talking about that afterwards, you had some other pretty cool stories. And thank you very much for agreeing to come on back and share some of these. One of the questions that actually came up was about wearing your own footwear while doing selection. And some guys are like, no, that's BS. You can't wear your own footwear while you're doing selection.
So yeah, you talked about that one aspect. The only thing I went on selection with was, I think the Bergen and my socks that were issued, right?
That's right.
Maybe the water bottles. But one thing that stood out for me from the start with the British Army was that we actually could purchase our own gear in a lot of aspects, because a lot of the British equipment was robust and meant to last, which meant it was heavy, right? So a lot of times we could supplement that with our own day sacks, our own altering our webbing or belt kit, or altering even our Bergens and things like that. So, I mean, that was quite common within that. I appreciated with going, within the British Infantry in my regiment. I know other regiments are more stricter than others, but it was very common for myself in the Highlanders and then Force Scots was that a lot of what we bought we could use in the field. Where I remember being, like in the Canadian Army where that wasn't necessarily promoted.
A little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit different, And, not, I have friends in the PPCLI and people, that's the, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. I have friends in the RCR, Royal Canadian Regiment. And those two regiments are completely different. And from hearing the stories of what they were allowed to use, issued, non-issued. And that brings up a point, Trav, that a lot of my friends and family from the last podcast that didn't have the military environment said that we used too many acronyms.
Right.
So we're going to have to try and work around that. So when I say PPCLI, I'm like Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry.
Right.
So I think we'll just be mindful of that.
As we work on through
it, yeah.
Well, off air here, we're talking about a couple pretty cool stories, and I think there's a way we can segue into it if we talk about Senior Brecken.
Mm-hmm.
So you were on a platoon sergeant battle course. That'd be Senior Brecken, is that?
Yeah, that's correct. We talked about in the last podcast where I did my Junior Brecken, which is the section commander's battle course. And I also did Senior Brecken, but I didn't really get into it too much. But both of those courses are career courses for the British Infantry. And you can specialize. You can go to mortars, you can go to anti-tank, snipers, recce, and they all have their section commander courses as well. But the gateway for promotion and advancement in the infantry really is the rifle company, junior Brecken, senior Brecken.
Okay.
It is streamlined for your career advancement.
Okay.
And it's actually the quicker way of going through it. So a lot of the guys that would go to the support companies, which is where the anti-tank and mortars are, the guys would come back into the rifle stream to do their career courses.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
come back in. Just like if you went to the depot. I said I went to the depot, which is the recruit training school, ITC Catterick, Infantry Training Catterick, where that is where all the British recruits for the infantry are trained. That is part of your career advancement, really, because you need those external write-ups, reports on yourself. But in order to get there, you have to do junior Brecken. So if you did section commander course in, let's say, anti-tank, that won't allow you to teach at the depot.
Got it.
Right?
Got
So
it.
it's the same for us with senior Brecken. So I think it's about 20 years old now, but there was a YouTube series called Battle Stripes.
Okay.
And it's the old way or the old course for senior Brecken.
I've seen that one.
Yeah. So that was a lot of that course was just like realistic and geared towards like survival.
Sure.
Like surviving the course.
Yeah.
The emphasis definitely changed by the time I was rolling around juniors and senior Brecken, where they were really trying to educate us and get that critical thinking involved, but still had the resilience and the robustness of the core principles of that training.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, senior Brecken, that's based in Brecken, obviously. We call it Infantry Training Center Brecken. And they run numerous elements of this career leadership aspect of the training. They run, as we talked about, the Section Commander's Battle Course. And they also do the Skill at Arms course prior to that. So you do 7 weeks of basically being able to teach every single weapon system in the British Army. So they become subject matter experts of that. And then they move on to their tactics phase, which is junior Brecken. I believe it's 8 weeks.
Okay.
And then they go back to battalions and they end up usually in the depots or wherever teaching. And then usually after that, that's a 2-year posting that take to the depots. Then they're going to do another, within the next 2 years, they usually end up going to senior Brecken. So about anywhere from 2 to 4 years after you can end up back down there. But what's interesting, which was new for me, in order to go on these courses, junior Brecken and senior Brecken, you had to do a pre-course in your battalion.
Okay.
And the pre-courses I found a lot of times were more demanding than the actual courses. So it would be like 2 weeks. Like, for example, for junior Brecken, you would be on this 2-week course, you'd be taught how to teach lessons. You'd be taught how to deliver orders at the section commander level and bumping one up to platoon sergeant level. And fitness, a lot of fitness.
Sure.
Being evaluated.
Yeah.
And then you're evaluated. So you could be on junior Brecken or the pre-course for juniors or seniors with maybe 20 other guys.
Okay.
And you might be competing for 3 spots.
Okay.
And it's simply a matrix. They basically score everything and they have the recommendations of who the top candidates are. And then usually those are the ones that get picked to go down. So it's a competition from that point on in the battalion for your advancement to keep moving forward, right? So you're competing for those 2 to 3 spots each regiment has to go down there.
Sounds fun, actually.
It's actually can be stressful, Trav, right? It's a lot of
I don't
stress,
doubt the stress.
and physically demanding. But
Sure.
what was interesting was I was actually deployed to Iraq with my battalion. And a lot of times what happens is that when you're on deployments, they still expect the career advancements to keep moving forward. So they'll send guys back to go on career courses. So I was up in Al Amara, which is the British sector of Iraq. There's Basra and Al Amara. And Al Amara, it's kind of like the British sector of the Marines Fallujah. It's kind of like where a lot of the fighting was, and really intense place to be. But
Sure.
A group of us, we had 2 companies up there, Delta Company, Bravo Company. Elements of that, the senior section commanders were sent to Cyprus to do our pre-course with the Royal Highland Fusiliers, which was based there. Because they were running it. They weren't going to run one in Iraq, obviously. It wouldn't have worked. So there was a group of us that we were flowing out of Al Amara down to Basra to Cyprus, And then we did our 2-week pre-course with the Royal Highland Fusiliers.
Okay.
And Cyprus is interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting place. It's a lot of elevation gain where they train, rocky, a lot of prickly things, pretty robust terrain to be training in. But I was successful on the pre-course, and then I was selected to go down to Senior Brecon. So the guys that weren't successful, they went back to Iraq, and then the rest of us were sent down to do Junior and Senior Brecon.
Okay.
So that's how I ended up in Senior Brecon. This time around, when I did Junior Brecon, I just came out of Kosovo. So it was a winter tour. We did a lot of walking. The food was a lot better being on tour, believe it or not, than when
Really?
actually in battalion. Yeah, because the budget was higher.
Okay.
And they had kind of like a lot of NATO set meals versus when I was, back in the barracks, we weren't known as, eating the best food.
No, you guys weren't. You don't have a reputation
No,
for that,
I
do
think
you?
we talked about that, didn't
Yeah,
we?
we do.
Yeah.
We did.
So that's one thing I did suffer a lot on was my fitness for Junior Brecon.
Okay.
The soldering aspect wasn't it, but we would be doing the 2-mile assessment, 5-mile assessment, 8-mile assessment, 3-mile assessment. These are all with like 35 to 55 pound gear. At the end of each training cycle, every Friday we'd have to do an assessment. So you're tired, you've been up all night doing your drills or your patrols.
Right.
And then they expect you to do a 2-mile run with 35 pounds in 21 minutes. Right?
Yeah.
Through the training area, right? For example.
Man.
So I did struggle on that aspect of it on Junior Brecon, but by the time I hit Senior Brecon, I had a different mindset. I still had my SAS fitness.
Mm-hmm.
I also knew what was to expect. So that's one thing that I did do on Junior Brecon a lot was Friday, Saturday nights. I'd always stay local with the guys, and we'd party a lot.
Sure.
Which doesn't help your fitness.
It
right?
does not, does it?
Doesn't help your fitness at all, Trav, right? As we know. And as you get older, it's harder to process that, right?
Yeah.
But on Senior Brecon, I would do all my homework. We'd be knocked off Friday afternoon. I would do all my homework, all my laundry, all my administration. There's a kebab shop in Brecon that is my favorite one in the entire UK. I'd get a kebab, head back to my barracks, and I'd go to bed. And in the morning, I'd get up, and I'd go run the SAS routes up in the beacons.
Right.
And I'd be knocked. I'd say I'd be knocked off. I mean, I'd be done my training myself by noon, and I would shower. And then my girlfriend at the time stayed in Tewkesbury, which is just down the road. So then I would pick her up, go for dinner, stay over, have Sunday dinner with her folks, and then I'd head back to Brecon Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And I would be in bed 8:30, 9 o'clock, ready to go for the week's activities. And compared to a lot of the guys, like the jocks or the Scots, would drive all the way up to Scotland. So they're rolling in at like midnight, Sunday night, trying to get things done. And then so I had a different approach this time around. So I was really enjoying, I didn't really enjoy juniors as much, but I was really having a good time on Senior Brecon at the time.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I think a lot of my approach was different, which paid dividends on the course. The first part of it is called LFTT, Live Fire Tactical Trainer.
Okay.
7 weeks long. And that has to do with, I mentioned in Junior Brecon, they do the Skill at Arms course first.
Right.
7 weeks, right? And this course is geared towards planning, running, and conducting live fire movement ranges.
Okay.
Up to company level. And this is geared towards the platoon commanders and the senior NCOs. You're doing a lot of, we call them templates and traces for, where you're going to set your ranges up. And then
Right.
there's a lot of work to it.
Yeah.
I was glad it was done.
Mm.
And then moving into the tactics. So the tactics is what we call Senior Brecon, and that's 8 weeks long. And it's taught by color sergeants.
Okay.
So we call them colors.
Yeah.
So, and it's not a derogatory term for people of color. It's basically a rank that was a senior NCO that was there to protect the colors or the flag.
Right.
Right. So we call them, so it's a senior NCO, we call color sergeants. So relating it to Canada, for example, would be a rank between their warrant and master warrant officer.
Okay.
So Britain actually has a rank for it, right? And traditionally, those color sergeants are either CQMS, company quartermaster sergeant, so they look after the gear and the logistics of the company.
Mm-hmm.
But in the infantry as well, they're also the senior instructors.
Okay.
So they train junior Brecken, senior Brecken, platoon commander's course, and other courses like that. And it's really important in your advancement that, like, I went to the depot as a section commander. I needed that external write-up, 2 years. If I continued in the British Army, I would have had to take, or should have taken, a 2-year posting as a color sergeant instructor. And actually, I was recommended to come back and work on the platoon commander's course.
Okay.
Because I had a really good disposition of working with the officers and
People liked you. You're a likable guy.
yeah, likable guy. So I think I had interest to go work, and I think it's really important to actually focus on our platoon commanders because they're actually the leaders of our platoons. And I, as a sergeant, I took it upon myself that I had to mentor my platoon commander. I didn't have to tell him what to do. My job was to mentor him and develop him, and I thought that was really important. But one thing that I had a hard time mentoring was if I had an arrogant officer.
Right.
Then it's really hard to mentor, and I'm just like, yeah, carry on, and you let them fall on their face. But
Sure.
there are few and far between. Like I had some phenomenal officers as platoon commanders, bosses, right, in my time.
Yeah, I guess the ego can kind of get away on some people.
Yeah.
At some point, and then it's
I mean,
it's a whole process.
Trav, and
keeping
we
it in
all
check.
have a bit of ego.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like I think as a section commander, we're expected to have that ego. Platoon sergeant, definitely, you need to have that ego. But I think it's healthy, but then it's also important to be humble, right? And maybe that ego is the confidence that we have in our professionalism and ability, right? And I'm not taking anything away from the non-infantry because they all judge us and just think, the infantry is this and that. But we also had that chip on our shoulder that we were the infantry or the bayonet or the spear of the army, right? So, and I was proud of that. Like I remember on senior Brecken, we're on the parade square, and we're loading our packs up. And honestly, by the time you had all your gear and your Bergens, probably 75 pounds to 80 pounds easily. Like I couldn't pick it up, Trav. I had to sit on the ground, put my Bergen on, roll over to stand up, and then walk to the truck. And then they have these all-arms skeleton arms courses. So how they had the infantry guys going on the skeleton arms. Well, they have all-arms. So the corps guys were going to do these courses so they can teach. And I can remember the sergeant, maybe he was an engineer, or maybe he was like REME, which is the Royal Electronic Mechanical Engineers. And he was going by, and he just stopped, and we're helping ourselves get up, and he's shaking his head and goes, "Guys, I don't know how you do it." Right? And I'm like, I don't know how I do it either, because we actually left that point and we did a 16-kilometer insertion tab, which is a march. We call it tab as a tactical advance to battle,
right,
across an impact area. An impact area is where the artillery and mortars land, and,
right,
and it's grass and it's wet, and we're walking through this with 75, 80-pound packs on, right?
Wow.
And, so that was kind of like, I don't know how I do it either. And the joke.
But you just do it.
Well, the joke is, now people are dealing with VAC, which is Veterans Affairs Canada, or wherever, and they're trying to relate maybe a knee or ankle injury isn't related to our service. And it's like the memes showing like this infantryman with an 80-pound pack, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to have an effect somehow later on in the life for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm deaf as a door now, right?
Yeah,
as we know.
Yeah, I cranked your audio here at the beginning.
Yeah. Trav, I got hearing aids. Yeah. Oh, sorry, mate. Yeah. Yeah, I think we were talking about ego, and I think it. Just to summarize, I mean, part of it is healthy, but I think within moderation, to be that humble, quiet professional, I think goes a long way for me and how I respond and responding to others, right?
Yeah, and learning as well.
Yeah. I do think it's important though to have, like the section commanders and platoon sergeants to have the confidence. So I think a lot of people mistake ego for confidence. And I think maybe that's the connection we're missing, is that you're confident in your ability and your skills and your trade and your leadership. And I think that's important. And a lot of times that can get mixed up with ego. So I think maybe that's,
That's a good perspective. And I guess confidence to the point of not accepting any other options or outside opinions or reasonable persuasion. That's probably when it turns into ego.
For sure, Trav, and we've seen that a lot, and we've talked about a lot of that, what we've seen on social media and people with their experiences. But this isn't new for me, and this actually came to light. Like when I did come back to Canada, I was applying for the RCMP, and I was applying in the fire service. And people say, with the RCMP, is like, why are you going to the fire service? Well, it's the number one part of my resettlement training. They actually covered a lot of the training costs. So I did that. But I remember the RCMP saying, like, why are you in the fire processes? And I said, well, I need a career when I come back. And what happens if you defer me? Then I need to keep moving forward. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's a fair one. But that did come up. Like I had a lot of my confidential reports were really positive and showed my attributes that I achieved. A lot of my references indicated, great leadership and skills. But they kind of looked at that with ego. And I had to explain some of my references too, and say, well, it's very confident in his ability and skills. It's different than ego. But I don't think they could relate that. So it was hard. It was a hard sell.
Well, it's a different background too, and it's a different skill set. And so when it comes across and somebody looks at that, I guess in some ways, and I'm not saying that people looking at that were a number two person, but a number two person can look at a number one person and be intimidated and attribute confidence to ego.
I know where you're going with this, Trav. You're talking about the recruiting teams. I get it. Maybe we'll...
I'll tread lightly on that one.
Trav, and I agree. They look for like-minded people. And long story short, they deferred me for a year, and they said, we're going to defer you because we think you need more time to adjust coming back. And, we find maybe your approach is too military right now. And then the next phone call was Vancouver Fire hiring me. So, and I'm very thankful. I believe our journeys are the way they go. When the RCMP team reached out to me in a year and said if I was still interested to go to the depot, I said, no, thank you. I found a good career choice for me, which actually allowed me to move into the outdoor field, which I love so much, in adventure therapy, and work toward being a mountain guide and maybe looking at some adventure therapy programs down the road.
That'd be fantastic.
But I had a thought the other day of all things, Trav. I was making a tikka masala, homemade naan bread, nice salad, making some cheesecake, a little bit of topping, some whipped cream, and I'm like, man, one of the best things the fire service taught me was how to cook. And I go, had I gone to the RCMP, I'd probably be making craft dinner right now.
That's right. Peanut butter and jelly and craft dinner.
I don't know. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
But I was just like, that's something that even in Afghanistan, we'll put up one of the pictures was that, we were on hard rations for 7 to 8 months. After a month, I couldn't do it. So we were buying potatoes, onions from the locals, oil. We were making fries. We were buying flour, making pancakes. We were doing anything we could to supplement our food. And there's one picture of me cooking like Spam, onions, and potatoes over a mess tin.
Hey, Spam's not bad. I was diehard against Spam until I went to Hawaii, and they have Spam musubis, they call them. And it's actually pretty good. They deep fry it up in a sauce and put rice, but that's a little bit off topic on this one.
I mean, the Brits have their corned beef and hash, which was horrible. Well, it reminds me of cat food. Not that I know what cat food tastes like, John, but it was. So that's why we're supplementing our meals,
sure.
Right? But yeah, so coming back to Senior Brecken, the tactics phase is 7 weeks long.
Yeah.
And because I was in that training cycle I was in, we have to do we call it, so that we have the SAS, Special Air Service, British Special Forces, fan dance, which is that 24-kilometer over the Brecon Beacons, down the Roman Road, back over. You have 4 hours to do it. Well, there's also a Senior Brecken fan dance. And it's around the same distance, slightly different route. And that was a very important assessment for people. And simply, it's also an assessment in physical ability, but you also, for the potential leaders to be in a leadership role. And I remember one of the color sergeants from my regiment, Tony Rawlson, big shout out to Tony Rawlson. He's a late entry major now, he's done really well, but he was one of my first platoon sergeants, mentors in the Highlanders. He was our color sergeant down there. not my personally, but he was in my company, senior div. And he said, Jace, you got to get in a leadership role. And as luck would have it, I was in a leadership role. I ended up being 51 Mortarman number 2. So I had a satchel, the mortar satchel. I'm like, how am I going to excel here? Really hard, because they'd have the platoon commander appointment, platoon sergeant appointment, the section commander appointments to ICs. I'm not in a leadership role. I'm just getting assessed on my fitness. And I think the weight's like 55 pounds.
Okay.
So we have all our gear for this. And we set off. And the platoon commander, what's interesting about seniors is that even though it's for the infantry, within the British Army, the SF go on it as well. So there'll be guys from the SAS on it, Pathfinders on it. So the platoon commander was a lad from Hereford, one of the SAS lads. And he had a guy assigned to him as the platoon signaler. So he had his 55 pounds plus the platoon radio, this heavy radio that he's got. And within 500 meters of setting off, this platoon signaler dropped.
Okay.
He just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I run over and I grab the radio and I throw it on my pack. I'm like, I got it. So I still have my 51 kit, the mortar kit, and I've got the radio, and I'm on with the platoon commander, this SAS lad. And off we go. And I just stay with him. And we start climbing the fan, heading up there. And numerous times I had guys, hey, Jace, I can get the radio. No, I got it. And I just stayed on the radio, stayed with me. And I just stayed up with the platoon commander. And we both knew, because we'd been up there so much, we know the routes, and we're just leading, both him and I are navigating the platoon through the checkpoints. And then about halfway through, you end up having to go up this 3 kilometer, like you've come down the penny fan. Yeah. You cross over, and I don't know the name of it, but it's like 3 to 4 kilometers straight uphill. And the staff introduce a stretcher. I believe the stretcher is 300 pounds. Okay. So it's a stretcher with tank tread on it, tank track to get 300 pounds. So that's part of it. Now you need to get, the platoon needs to get this 300 pound plus all the other gear up this, right? Yeah. And we also had some other platoon weapons. We had the general purpose machine gun in Canada, the C6, UK it's a GPMG. We also had the light machine gun weapons. So in UK it's a Minimi, Canada it's a C9. The 51's in there. So the platoon gets a stretcher, and the platoon commander goes to me, he's like, Jace, don't get on the stretcher, you got the radio. I'm like, okay. So that's fair, because I've had the radio the whole time. And as the platoon starts moving up, guys are dropping off, and the color sergeants are yelling, no weapon systems get left behind, they move forward with the stretcher. So I look back, and one of the section commanders has 2 rifles, and somebody has the Minimi or C9 extra now. Because as guys fall back, they can't keep up. Right. The weapons got to keep coming forward. So I started taking, like I took a C9 or Minimi off one of the section commanders. I took a rifle. I think I ended up with the 51. So I had a Minimi, my rifle, another rifle, and the 51. Yeah. And I'm doing this job because I still had this SCS fitness, and I'm training on my weekends for it. And now I'm actually like, well, we can't use his name. You'll beep that out, eh?
Yeah, I'll beep it out.
So the platoon commander, he jumps on, right? Yeah. And now I'm actually leading the platoon up. And there was one of the lead color sergeant in my platoon was from 1 para, and he yells up and he's like, Bud. I go, yes, color. He goes, do you want any more gear? I go, I'm good, color, right? So I go up, I lead us up, and when we level off, we can see the checkpoint, and it's about 500 meters away. And the boss, platoon commander, goes, Jace, go check us in. So we'll just roll through. So I ran, still got all the gear. I ran, checked us in, got us signed in to that checkpoint, got the new grid we were going, gave it to the boss, and off we went. And we finished it. So I actually they get a grade for it. I got it. They don't grade, like as an appointment. They don't grade you. They just grade you on your fitness. Sure. But I got an A grade. Okay. For doing the fan dance, which is rare. Usually they just say pass or fail if you weren't in a platoon commander, platoon sergeant role. And I ended up getting an A grade. So that was a rarity. I got an A grade for my fitness and leadership within that. So that was on the senior fan. So pretty emotional, but.
Yeah, it'd be a heck of a lot of work. We were talking about the training that you did in Senior Brecken. And how regimented it was and how proper it was, and the advice that you got from Robbie Gilmore.
Yeah. So I guess leading into this, Trav, was that all the ranges in the UK were booked because at the time when I was on seniors, I believe 2007,
Okay.
January. So they run courses 3 times a year, January, March, and then July or something, right? So luck would have it. Here I am again in January on Wales, right?
Yeah.
But all the ranges are booked because UK is in Iraq and Afghanistan, so that takes priority. So what was happening was they were taking the final exercise of seniors in the platoon commander's battle course and taking us to either Malawi or Kenya.
Okay.
So our final exercise is 4 weeks long in the bush. So it's kind of cool, considering
Totally.
you go to Brecon or you end up in Malawi, Africa.
Yeah.
So prior to us going to Malawi, Africa, they brought in a subject matter expert. The company commander did.
Right.
And when we talk about the ORBAT, which is the organization, how it's structured, there'd be 3 platoons in senior Brecon, and three platoons would have roughly about 30 guys each. So there's 90 of us and the staff in this auditorium. And they didn't tell us who the guest speaker was. So as I walk in, I visualize, check everything out, and I see that there is this civilian gentleman sitting there, and he's older, maybe not at the fittest he could be,
Not
right?
in the prime of his life.
Not prime of his life. And I'm just sitting there going, man, like, what is this guy going to teach us? Who is this guy?
Yeah.
Right? And when the company commander stood up to introduce him, they introduced him as Peter McAleese. And he wrote the book No Mean Soldier.
Got that book, yeah.
And it's an interesting book for the guys to read.
Yeah.
And a quick summary of Peter was that he joined the British Parachute Regiment, British SAS, and then he went to Zimbabwe, which used to be Rhodesia, and he fought, I believe, in the Rhodesian SAS.
Right.
And he wrote a book about his time, and he ended up after the war ended in the South African forces, and then out and about. And
Right.
I believe he was involved in that movie that came out about taking down Escobar, right?
Right,
And
yes.
he was at a bad helicopter crash, and not to divert from that, but I was like, wow, I've read his book, and this is Peter, so this is going to be great to learn from this, right?
Totally.
And you mentioned Robbie Gilmore, and Robbie Gilmore was a Canadian soldier that went and volunteered and joined the Rhodesian forces as well. And Peter was his platoon sergeant. And there's a book, or in his book, there is Robbie Gilmore standing there doing paperwork after an attack.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, that's Robbie Gilmore. So as a young guy, I was 17 years old on my basic training here. Robbie was my platoon warrant on basic training. And I remember him telling the platoon that when you do this for real, this platoon or bat or organization, it'll fall apart. And it's not going to matter 1 section, 2 section, 3 section. It's going to be you group do this, you group do that. And this needs to happen now. And that stuck with me as a young 17-year-old, wide-eyed, listening to Robbie Gilmore. So bringing it back to Senior Brecon, Peter did his presentation, talked about some of the bush fighting he did and the bush tactics. He really focused on that element, not anything else that he did after, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of his presentation, all the color sergeants were surrounded him.
Right.
And chatting. So I kind of like started to sneak between them.
Yeah.
Right. And I could see Peter looking at me, and the color sergeants are looking at me like, okay, what's this guy doing? And I just said, hey, sir, my name is Jace Budd, and I'm from Canada. And Robbie Gilmore was my old platoon warrant RSM at my regiment. And his eyes lit up in the connection. And he's like, oh, like the connection was really phenomenal to have that. And he's like, how's Robbie doing? I said, well, you heard he's doing this, and I heard he's doing that, doing well. He said, oh, that's great. Can you pass on my regards? Small world. Another shout out to Mark Lundy from the Seaforth here. And Mark got a message to Robbie saying, hey, Jace just met Peter at a presentation prior to going to Malawi.
Cool.
And, it was and Robbie said that's a very small world, right?
Totally is.
Yeah.
Small world when you push yourself hard and you start working your way up the food chain. The number of people that you can look side to side, your peers, will definitely start to narrow down. So these are some bigger names in in the world of professional soldiering. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Malawi. So 2-3 days prior to going to Malawi, we were still doing our range training. And it was snowing, sleet, wet. We're doing an attack range, and I'm in a river and freezing. And then 3 days later, we are in Malawi, Africa, 55 above and raining.
Yeah.
12 hours to climatize in the hangar, catch up sleep, and you're out. But it's interesting, before we went out, the sergeant major said, guys, I put a barrel of DEET in your laundry room, so go dip your combats in to go over to Malawi.
Yeah.
So I do it, and as I walk in, my eyes are burning from this DEET. And I dip it in, and I'm like, this can't be good. And I start doing research on DEET, Agent Orange, and all this stuff from Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so I washed my combats about 4 times
After that.
Where a lot of guys just took it out, dried it. Like, we're dipping it in barrels, Trav, right?
DEET works awesome. Don't get it near plastic. It'll melt your plastic.
I know. I had a watch.
Oh, did you?
Back in the day, melt to my hand, right? Plastic watch, the vacuum.
Yeah.
The old Timex ones. Yeah, it melted to my hand. I woke up, put the DEET on my hand. Yeah. So I washed that out. They also put us on Larium.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it didn't work for me. Like, they put us on about 2 weeks prior to going. It did not work for me at all.
Yeah.
I was like the guy, I'd be standing on my cot or in my bunk in Brecon at 2 a.m. thinking I'm bad dreams, swatting at birds in the room and stuff. The guy's like, what are you doing? So I had to go off that. I went on this other meds. We could probably talk about that.
Yeah.
Another story. It's quite, the meds they put me on is quite funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then we end up in Malawi, and the final exercise is 4 weeks.
Okay.
And it's 2 weeks blank fire.
Okay.
Training, and then 2 weeks live fire training. So it's pretty intensive final exercise.
No kidding.
And we're mostly working in our platoons, doing patrols and attacks and deliberate patrols, fighting patrols. And then at the live fire, we start coming together more as a company and doing more company level attacks and everything. But I remember, like, one of the first few nights being in our harbor, and I think we talked about, we haven't done that podcast yet. We talked about the lions circling the harbor
right
at night. Yeah. And there'd be like one rifle. One of the color sergeants would have one rifle with live rounds, and that would be it in our group of 30, right, for example. But we had paraflares on the sentry positions to fire at the lions if they got too close, but they're literally circling our harbor.
Just waiting.
Right? Yeah, But yeah, we had lions and
tasty, DEET smelling
black
Brits.
mambas and all types of things going on in Malawi. One of the things that really stood out for me was, prior to this, training in the UK, we're very NATO orders and NATO breakdown of our platoons. But in Malawi, for example, when it's 55 above and raining, that promotes the grass growing. And the grass is like 6 feet high. So they'd have these open areas called gambles, and the gambles would be anywhere from 1 to 200 meters wide, depending even more, and then you have the forest blocks. So you might be tasked to clear the gambles, but you're not actually allowed to set foot in the gambles. Okay. So you have to orbit your platoon so that it's on either side of the gambles. So now, traditionally, we had we call it orbit, but it's the organizing your platoon. And a platoon would have the boss or the platoon commander with his group, 3 rifle sections of 8 guys, the section commander, and a platoon sergeant's group. And that was like the standard NATO format. But that didn't necessarily work in Malawi because you needed to clear both sides of the gamble. So we would experiment with, like, maybe you have the platoon commander's group, 2 sections on the right, platoon sergeant group, and 1 section on the left, and you're working on fire supporting each other. But you'd be expected to clear the gamble without setting foot in it.
Right.
So you're clearing the woods beside it. And if you ever crossed, you'd fail your appointment.
Auto fail.
Yeah, you'd be automatically, you failed it. So that was really good. That was a really good teaching point for me, was that, you follow the NATO format, but be flexible the way you organize your group. And this really became apparent for me in Afghanistan, because I mentioned in the last podcast that I went out and was attached to Zulu Company 4-5 Commando as a continuity NCO, NCO non-commissioned officer. Basically, the British have a really good system where they put the incoming organization.
Mm-hmm.
They send some of the NCOs and officers
Yeah.
to be on the ground and be as continuity for
Right.
the handover. So I think I mentioned, like, I had to learn the new 338 to teach our sniper dets,
Right.
and then just learn the ground. And so I had already been on the ground, and by the time my platoon came down, this was going to be one of their first operations
Okay.
for them to go out this night into an ambush.
Yeah.
And the area we were in was called Garmazir, and there was very static, robust. It was the furthest, I believe, is south that we could go to the Pakistan border, and they had that 1 hour golden hour for the flight. So we weren't. It was basically the British weren't allowed to advance anymore because it'd be more than that 1 hour. So it was really dug in,
Right.
and the Taliban would use this area as a training area.
Sure.
So they were coming across from Pakistan, and then they would train 8 to 10 days, and they just bypass us in the desert. They bypass it down, but we had this like 4 kilometer frontage, and there was a mountain on one side called Jaitak Hill, and the Helmand River running that side, and then there was a canal on the left side. The 4 kilometers was an old Russian bunkhouse,
Okay.
and we basically beefed it up. The engineers built it up to be a fighting fortification. So how we did our structure down in here as a company level, a platoon would man Jaitak Hill and Balaclava checkpoint, we called this area.
Okay.
And half the platoon would go to one and the other half to the other. So platoon sergeant would go one and boss would take the other one. And I always ended up in Balaclava checkpoint, which is fine.
Sure.
And we'd be there for a 7-day cycle in our rotation. But what was happening was in the mornings, the Taliban would always come and I call it an ambush, but they would do a shoot on Balaclava every morning.
Sure.
So the company commander wanted to counter ambush us. So this is going to be one of the first big operation for this company, new company. Like I said, I've already been on down 6 weeks or as it was, so
Right.
I'm pretty familiar with it. This was going to be one of the first operations for the company, and my platoon was a little later arriving too. So this is it. This is their first thing. So what was supposed to happen was one of the platoons was going to man the checkpoints. Another platoon was going to actually man the primary ambush site. They ambushed the Taliban.
Right.
That tries to ambush us. Right?
Yeah.
My platoon's job was to cross the canal, which actually was our field engineers were going to put an infantry footbridge in.
Okay.
So with our help, we're going to put this infantry footbridge across the canal, and then the ambush group would go to theirs. And we talked about Jaitak Hill was a mound that the British made from one of the first Anglo-Afghan wars
Right.
150 years ago.
Right.
And it's probably 100 meters high. Well, they made a bunch of these mounds, and there was a couple other mounds now on the other side of the canal. One was 300 meters away called Little Brother.
Okay.
And then there was another one that was pretty big, probably as big as Jaitak Hill. That was 100 meters high. I think 100 meters high. I can't. It was a big mound called Taliban Hill.
Okay.
We call it Taliban Hill. Our job was to go to Little Brother and protect the ambush site. That was our job. So we had, I believe, 3 rifle sections. We had a fire support section. So we had attachments from, we had a couple machine guns, snipers, anti-tank, all attached to this. And I had my group, platoon sergeant's group. I believe I had the 51 mortar, and I had a foldable stretcher that one of the big guys carry in my group. So we would be doing the resupply and casualty evacuation if we needed it. Mm-hmm. And the platoon commander had, I believe he had some attachments. He had a couple engineers, platoon signaler. So we have this big group traveling, right? And then the platoon commander sets off, leading us out. So imagine now I'm going to be bringing up the rear. I'm doing the release point, and it's nighttime too. I don't know if I mentioned that. So
no, I was going to ask. So this is middle of the night.
Like 11 o'clock, midnight, right?
And
night vision.
And this is when Taliban want to advance as well too. It's nighttime.
No, they're probably coming in first lightish.
Okay.
4.
Okay.
Right. We just need to be in position before 4. That's the goal, right?
Okay.
4 a.m. They didn't really move. They like to move around too much at night.
Okay.
Without the night vision and everything, we did most of our patrols were done at night for us to have us the advantage, right? They did a lot of their action was during the day, I found.
Okay.
Or first light, last light during the day, and then they hunkered down during the night.
Just like hunting. Animals. We're all animals, I tell you.
So as I'm setting off, Trav, I'm looking right, and I'm like, oh, there's little brother, and we're not going there.
Oh, no.
And I see the platoon heading off the Taliban hill, which is a kilometer away.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, uh-oh. And by this time, like, I radioed up to the boss, and we just kind of adapt the plan, and we're going to Taliban hill. So we're a kilometer away.
New plan.
Yeah, like, it's kind of like, I think it was Hamburger Hill, that line, like, you're in the wrong ambush site, or maybe platoon. But I'm like, that was in my mind. Like, we're in the wrong ambush site, right? Oh, man. But so up they went, and the engineers were there to clear it because I know the Taliban in the past had put anti-personnel mines in the top, and some of the Royal Marines got caught in that. And so engineers go up, they clear it, and our guys go up. So I'm down in the bottom, and I'm securing at the base of it. We call it the FRV, or it's like a release point.
Okay.
So this is the rally point that everybody, they're going to come back to it. So I need to secure that.
Mm-hmm.
And our guys go up for the night. Sure enough, 4 a.m., our guys, because you have the anti-tank guys, we bring them with us because they have the Javelin sight, which is thermal imaging. So they can actually see the Taliban moving. So we can see them moving into the ambush well before the actual ambush site. But they're coming from I believe they're coming from a different area. And we got told to spring our ambush on the Taliban, so we did. And this happened around, first light, or just still dark, right? They were just kind of moving. And traditionally, when you spring an ambush, you withdraw.
Okay.
But we didn't get the order to withdraw. So we held in position, I think, for another hour. I think what was happening, we were trying to feel out what was going on, and maybe we can draw more Taliban in, right?
Right.
So by the time we got the order to withdraw, I think it's like 6 a.m. now. So we've been here a long time. And just prior to the order, though, I could tell things were getting really tense, right? And then I had one of the 51 mortarmen and then one of the stretcher dudes doing rear security said, Jace, there's a couple dudes here. And I go, what? He goes, a couple dudes here. And I look back, basically the grass, this field is shoulder height and we're all down. I stand up and I look, and I hope they're farmers, Trav. I don't know.
Sure.
But they were 50 meters, less than 50 meters away, and we both look at each other. Oh, and it was like
deer in the
headlights both ways. And it was like, if they had anything that resembled a weapon, it would have been like
over.
Go. But I just thought, no, farmers. And we both get down, and I think they were just nosy what was going on. Maybe they're a recon party. I don't know. They didn't have any weapons. Jeez. But if they had anything, it would have been like go time for us, right? But so now the order comes to withdraw, and the platoon starts coming down. But prior to this, the platoon commander is like, Sergeant Bud, I need you to plan a withdrawal route that doesn't go the way we came for obvious reasons, right? And I'm like, aye, sir. 400-meter run across the open field, get in the canal, we go down the canal bank. Right? It's like, yeah. So I remember one of the snipers being one of the last off, and he's like, they're coming. And the next thing I know, RPGs are landing indirect around us, and they fire the RPGs, indirect fire.
Right.
Like in the air, and creating a beaten zone, I guess. And they actually, far as I know, occupied Little Brother, where we should have been on.
Where you guys were supposed to be, yeah.
So as this starts moving, right, the platoon commander already has half, I believe he had himself and maybe half the platoon with him in the open field, moving to the canal. We're just going like on a straight angle to it. And then I believe they opened fire, a small arms fire, PKM fire, 7.62 fire now is firing at us in the open. I still have half the platoon with me in the FRV. And the boss had the other half platoon with him now. They actually made it through the open field. And then the other, they're across now.
Yeah.
And there was this like a 4-foot retaining wall at the canal. And they're putting a fire support base in. And like platoon separated now.
Totally. And
I know that like from our training that the Taliban can flank within 10 minutes. I'm like, we got to move. We got to get out of here. We got to move. And bear in mind, this is my platoon's first movement. And I'm just like, all right, guys, we're going to peel. Let's just start doing a big peel, fire maneuvering. And I don't know if they can't hear me, but nobody's moving. And I'm like, okay. I yell, everybody throw smoke. And nothing's happening, right? Man. But I think we're spaced out and everything. Sure. And then I'm like, you know what, Jay? If you get up and run, this is my mind. They're all going to follow you.
Yeah.
So I did. I got up and I started doing the 400-meter run across this open field.
Yeah.
And I can hear the rounds singing.
Yeah.
And there was a section that was that was out in the open. They were ahead of me. And Trav, I was moving so fast, I passed them. And I have the platoon sergeant radio. Jeez. Like, I motored past this section. And it was just like, nothing outworked. I'm like, they'll follow me, right?
Yeah.
We had a good fire support base coming in from the wall.
Yeah.
And I remember the rounds hitting the wall as we dive over the wall and right below where the guys are firing back, right? And would you believe, Trav, not a single guy got hit. Everybody got over the wall, got in. But the entire platoon now is mixed up.
Right.
And they're firing back. They're firing back little brother. So now we have like that, everything's gone. And the platoon commander is trying to get a fire mission. Which a fire mission would be from the desert we had 105 guns in the desert, artillery support. But he, and no fault of his own, but he was giving the wrong coordinates because he was mixing up Little Brother and Taliban Hill, right?
Got it, yeah.
So he wasn't getting the fire mission. I'm like, boss, we got to move. And he wants to get this fire mission, which is fair. Let's suppress. But I'm like, my concept is they're going to get in the canal and enfilade us, and we got to go.
Right.
So the platoon's gone in terms of the Orbat, and it was basically, you group here, fire support. You group are going to move. You're going to move first. Move now. Right? And next group, you're next to move. And I just grabbed the boss and I put him in a group. And we just started doing this big fire maneuvering down this canal for probably a good kilometer. Right. The boys nicknamed it the Mogadishu Mile, right? So what was interesting as well, Trav, was that the Afghan police have a checkpoint in the middle of the town. And they have a Sanger built on the top of their building.
Okay.
And they're probably 600, 700 meters away in the town. So a lesson learning here is that we should have had maybe an element there to control them. So they started firing at us as well.
Oh, man.
From that. And they don't know what they're firing at. And they have iron sights and, they're just firing. Yep. So we didn't know we're actually getting where we're taking fire from. But we were taking fire from both sides. The Afghan police and the Taliban from there. And we did this basically fighting withdrawal down this canal. And I kind of, be the platoon sergeant, I called the regroup, is where we get everybody back together about 100 meters short of the company that was holding the empty footbridge for us, right? I didn't want to come in there looking like a big rabble, right? So I did a regroup. Not really a reorg, but a quick regroup.
Right.
We got everybody back now into our 1 section, 2 section, 3 section boss, platoon sergeant's group. And then I had the boss go first and lead it in. And the concept was, we look pretty professional coming through. Sure. I didn't want this big Mogadishu Mile coming through the company checkpoint, right?
A good team player as well.
Yeah. And then, handed it back.
Sure.
And off we go across, right?
Yeah.
So that was a lesson that I learned from Robbie Gilmore, is that when you do this for real, it's not going to matter 1 section, 2 section, 3 section. That's great if you can keep that integrity, but often it's going to fail, and it's you group do this and you group do that, Yeah. And Trav as well, not to cut you off there.
Yeah.
I realized why we do that 2-mile run in full kit. I'm like, who runs down a road like an idiot with 35 pounds on and in 21 minutes, right?
Jeez.
In full gear. It totally makes sense. I know why we do it.
In hindsight,
yeah.
Any future soldier, current soldier,
yeah.
This is why you do it.
Yeah, that's why we did it.
Jason, every time I speak with you, there's always some great stories, and I always get some greater insight into you as a person. And the more that you share with everybody else, I really respect what you're doing. I mean, it takes a lot to be able to sit down and talk about these stories and talk about the transition from military into civilian life and sort of the next steps. And I think you should write a book, or you should probably get your own podcast at some point.
You know, Trav, it's interesting you talk about this. I was listening to a podcast on the way over, and the one thing I really enjoy our time together is how much we laugh. And one thing in the UK that really stands out is the British sense of humor.
Right.
When times are tough, they have a black sense of humor and everything else. And this is podcast I was listening to was talking about mental health during the pandemic.
Right.
And how it's suffering. And they were talking about PTSD and everything else.
Sure.
But one thing that they said, one of our stress reflexes, one of the way we can manage it is laughter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the British are really big for it, banter. Mm-hmm. And you have to be careful because too much banter becomes criticism and picking on people. But
sure.
But that's one thing I really appreciate with us is that we have a lot of fun and laughs doing these podcasts. And I think that's really important. And I think you hit on, some of the areas that I would like to go down the road. And it might be writing my memoirs. A lot of people have said that. And relating it to my journey back here, my journey in the fire service, my journey with my own struggles with mental health, and how the outdoors has nurtured and helped me heal. And, how much passion I have for adventure therapy.
Right.
So, yeah, Trav, I wouldn't mind doing a podcast down the road that is maybe geared towards adventure therapy. Who knows,
Well, why don't we ask the listeners? If anyone's listened all the way to the end here and they want to hear about adventure therapy and the journeys from the military through fire to civilian life and dealing with the struggles and mental health, let us know. And we'll do that podcast. If you're game, I'm totally game.
Yeah, for sure, Chop.
Okay.
Yeah, more time to laughs and
I love it.
Spend some time with you.
Well, Jason, thank you very much for coming back on the Silvercore Podcast. I really appreciate it.